Thank you, everybody, for coming. I am grateful that you've all made it here. I had a very lengthy travel journey myself on Saturday night into very early Sunday morning. Hopefully, we all have safe travels that are as fast as possible in the next couple days going home. But we're going to talk about safely sourcing open source software, kind of trying to understand beyond zero CVEs. So as we kick this off, before we get started, just a little bit about me. Set expectations really high to start out with. Two-time college dropout, so all things are possible. I was a former world leader, which was the most amazing job title ever. That was when I was in charge of the bike department at Toys R Us. So they called the different areas in the store worlds, so I got to be a world leader. Currently, I'm a security consultant at ControlPlane. I'm also an open source maintainer for the Entoto project, a couple of sub-projects, Witness and Archivista, and then in the OpenSSF, the SBOMIT project, and the update framework. We just had the 10-year birthday for Entoto, so I've not been working on it for 10 years, but it's awesome to kind of see that milestone. And I'm also a co-chair for the CNCF's technical advisory group for security and compliance, and try to be active and contribute as many places as I can across the CNCF and OpenSSF. So this is the abstract that was in the session here. It's a bit dry. It's a bit boring, probably. I'm a little surprised you all showed up here. So rather than taking this abstract and just making it concrete and telling you the details of everything, I'd like to tell you a story instead. And before I get started, I have to put a little disclaimer here that this is a fictitious example. All the characters in this, I actually have played that role myself, whether it's an open source maintainer, consumer of open source, or a vendor that sells zero CVE images. We only, as a company, sell zero CVE images for the Flux project, not everything. So any thing that you see that mimics real life too much is purely coincidental. So there are demons in the world, right? There are all these things that we have to overcome, whether they're absurd customer requirements or delivery deadlines or budget cuts. Nobody here has ever been asked to do more with less, have they? Maybe. So how do we deal with this? How do we deliver software faster, do more with less? We use open source, right? So this is going to be a story about an open source project called Huntrix. Anybody here seen K-pop Demon Hunters? Anybody love it? Okay, hopefully we got a couple fans. And here we have our open source maintainers. So the Linux Foundation does a bunch of really great research. They did some research into the economic value of open source software. The TLDR of all of the details on here is, yes, using open source software is worth it. Companies that use it get more value. They make more money than they put into it. A lot of companies don't put any money into it, so any money they make from it is more. But also the cost of rebuilding what exists in open source would be, in this case, for most people, 4 times as expensive as just using open source. So we have this open source project called Huntrix, and it is golden, right? It's doing all the right things. It's solving all the problems that you have, but these patterns start to emerge, things that are not quite right. The GitHub issues aren't getting responses anymore. The PRs are staying open longer than they did in the past. The roadmaps are out of date. All the people working on it are now working on it as volunteers when they used to work at a company that funded their contributions. There's another statistic here. 58% of maintainers have either quit or considered quitting working on their projects. Maintainer burnout is a real thing. Like I said, playing the role of an open source maintainer, I can feel the struggle is real. One of the things, all of these patterns, actually, if you go to LFX Insights, you can look and see these exact things. You can see the average time it takes for issues to close on CNCF or other LF projects, all of these sorts of things. So, the Saja boys have entered the chat. Rather than just being the open source project, they're a company that has the same project with an SBOM and a SLSA build provenance and 0 CVEs, right? This is gonna solve all of the problems you have. It is worth all of the money your company is willing to spend on it. And then people see this, we're users of open source software. We wanna go back to the project and say, can't you do this same thing that they're doing, but for free? Right? You can, like, it's just these simple 9 questions that we want you to answer. This is an actual survey that the maintainer of the curl project received, asking about his compliance with the EU's Cyber Resilience Act. This is a lot for a person, a volunteer, a human being, to respond to so that you can use this software in something else that you're trying to build and sell. So, as a maintainer, you could imagine why you might be a little upset when this comes into your inbox. On top of the fact that you have real users and other people asking for more features, more bug fixes, more patches all of the time, and then to try and do all this compliance stuff on top of it. So, is it time for a takedown? Is this entire talk about hating companies or people trying to sell 0 CVE images? Is it to tell you that they're lying, everything else? No, it's not worth it. It's personally not worth holding a bunch of anger and resentment and things like that. And if you do, in the end, here's the maintainers on an empty train. All of their users have left. They're gone. Because they're not paying attention to what really matters. So is there some good inside of this, right? You've got the Saja boys doing all of these things, producing these amazing images. Well, they're actually using a bunch of tools that are open source in order to do that. They have things like the Wolfie project, which is open source to build minimal container images. A lot of the people who work at these companies built things like the SigStore project and the SLSA project. There's a lot of things in the open source around scorecards in the OpenSSF and the baseline project, which we heard about on the keynote the first day. So there are some good things in here, right? There is a genuine effort to want to make things better. But it just eventually is too much for the project, right? There's gonna be a breakup. The maintainers can't get along. Some of them feel others are hiding things and they just don't wanna work together anymore. And this could be, in real life, the project just gets abandoned. It's not there anymore. You're not gonna get any new releases. You're not gonna get any new features. You're definitely not gonna get any expert support. And you're definitely not gonna get CVE patches anymore. It could be a licensed rug pull, right? They're so frustrated with not making money doing this project, or things aren't going the way they wanted them to. They change to some sort of business source license or something else that means as a company, you can't use that software anymore. Or it's just too old. The Kubernetes only supports 3, 4 major versions backwards. So if you're using 1.28, still you are out of support for Kubernetes. That is end of life. There are people who sell long-term support. There are efforts around that, but that is distinct from the upstream open source project. So in the end, your open source project that you loved, that you used, that solved all of your actual user-facing problems that you didn't invest in, you didn't support, you didn't contribute to because you just bought a 0 CV image from somewhere else. What do you do now? The project is gone. It's gonna be hard. So, rather than just thinking about 0 CVEs, what was the problem you were really trying to solve? And did you think having a 0 CVE image was going to help you deliver products to market faster? Was it going to help your engineering team communicate better and figure out what to do? Maybe they spent less time triaging vulnerabilities, but are they really building more features faster? Did you solve all of the other governance problems within your organization just by having container images with 0 vulnerabilities? We definitely didn't help build up the open source project. Did we fix the relationship between the developers and the security team? Probably not. They just didn't have to talk to each other anymore, right? How about the poor application architecture? How many of the vulnerabilities that may exist in your software are your own doing, and not because of the upstream open source? Or your DevOps practices. If you have this amazing stream of 0 vulnerability images, a lot of them are coming out a new image every single day. How many people, does anybody in here deploy to production every day? So a couple of head nods. How about once a month? But a few more people. There are people who deploy every 3 months or every 6 months. As an organization, if you buy 0 CVE images and you deploy to production every 6 months, you're going to have vulnerabilities. That's just like, there's no way around that. If instead you invested in being able to have more test coverage, be able to do these updates faster and roll things out, that may be time much better spent. And so who is the real enemy here? And in the end, it's not an open source project versus vendors selling open source versus someone else, right? There are real security threats out there. There are supply chain security compromises. There are nation state actors who want to steal your money, who want to make the world a terrible place. Or maybe in their minds better for them, but most all of us here would be worse off if the real enemy, the bad guys, won. So how are we going to fight back? What are we going to do? The first thing is we need the project to get back together again. We need to make sure that we have contributors. We need the people. And in this case, we have some very real help from foundations like the OpenSSF and the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. So one of the issues that I haven't really talked about is why do we care about 0 CVEs in the first place? A lot of that is a government regulatory requirement, right? There's a big need to be able to get to 0 CVEs because of the government saying you have to do this if you want to sell to them or to the Department of Defense, or if you're going to, with the EU CRA, support customers long term. All of these are going to be required. And if you don't do that, you're going to get fined lots and lots of money. The OpenSSF is talking and collaborating and working with, they have a global cyber policy working group. They're meeting with officials that are in the EU. They meet with officials from the US agencies, completely blanking on the name, but the CISA, the cyber group inside of Homeland Security, which is the group that had the executive order 14028 that had SBOMs for everybody. So trying to make those things actually useful, actually deal with real security problems, and then the other issues we've seen recently with funding issues around things like the US database for vulnerabilities, right? If you don't have people to look at all these vulnerabilities in, to triage them, to analyze them, to help update all of the scanners, to show that these vulnerabilities are not real or they don't affect, they just pile up and they keep turning all the dashboards red that you have all these problems. It makes it look like you have those problems when they're maybe not really there. They have a vulnerability disclosure working group which focuses on best practices around how to handle workflows around this, how to triage vulnerabilities, how to do analysis of vulnerabilities and things like that. So you can get help to do it better, to do it faster, to do it more reliably, more consistently. Another big part of what we can do is around tooling and automation and standards for open source projects. There's a Orbit working group in OpenSSF. This is where the baseline project, and security insights falls. And this is a group of people in the open collaborating on how to make it easier for open source projects to communicate their compliance outwardly. Well, let me rephrase that. Open source projects have no compliance obligations, but they can communicate the things that they have done that would be useful to prove for other organizations to prove their compliance, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. The Cloud Native Computing Foundation, in all of these foundations have neutral governance, right? You're not going to have a rug pull of a project that's in the CNCF. It's not going to change from an Apache 2 license to a business source license. It's not going to happen. Legal support. One of the things coming up with the EU CRA is this idea of a steward. So all of the foundations will likely fall into this category of a steward. They don't sell software, they don't make money off of this, but because the foundation exists from a bunch of companies that do sell software, and they give a whole bunch of money to the foundation, this would be a pretty easy loophole for all of these companies to not have compliance obligations. And so that's why this role of a steward exists. And that is an explicit legal responsibility that the foundations will have to ensure the software in those foundations does the right things. At the same time, there's a lot of uncertainty around this, right? We don't know how it's going to play out. We don't know as open source maintainers what we will have to do or be told we have to do or be asked to do. And if we don't do it, what happens then? Some of this will be settled as court cases after the fact. And so being a part of a foundation is really comforting, and that helps you sleep better at night. There's also the Technical Oversight Committee. This is kind of the group at the top of the CNCF from an engineer standpoint. These are the people who understand the projects and the code and the way open source software should work. The technical advisory groups. We just had a restructuring of the technical advisory groups to kind of help support the growth of the CNCF over the next 10 years. We had the last 10 years now. We went from having, a dozen projects to having 400 projects. The way that things were structured in the past wasn't ideal for supporting such a large number of projects, especially as they want to grow and advance from a sandbox stage to an incubating stage and so on. For the advisory groups, we have things like what I'm a part of, the security and compliance group. There's also ones around runtime, and there's a sub-project around artificial intelligence and how that applies across all of the CNCF. And then there's community groups. If you just want to talk to other people that are interested in platform engineering or supply chain security or other very specific topics, there are other people like you where you can have those conversations. So that's a little bit about how these foundations can shield us, but we still need more. We need to do a little bit extra. So a little bit more here about how tag security and compliance supports a lot of these projects. We have a publication around security self-assessments that projects can use and follow, and this will help them understand how to build a threat model for their project, how to understand what their security risks should and shouldn't be. One of the things about vulnerabilities being reported against your project and being discovered is your threat model matters in this situation, right? There was a CVE for the Helm project where they, when you do a Helm template, a secret would render in the output. Well, it's kind of what a Helm template is supposed to do, is render the values in the inputs, but that was a vulnerability according to the person who filed that. And you have to be able to understand that that's not really a problem. That's not something, we've seen similar sorts of things filed against logging projects, right? Where, your logs didn't redact something. Well, that may be within the threat model if it's a job it's supposed to have. But it also, you may explicitly say, we are not going to be the ones as just spewing logs out to a data store somewhere, that we're not going to be doing that. And then once you do that self-assessment, if you want to dig in deeper with the people with the security and compliance experience, we'll do a joint assessment with projects. And so actually working with them, collaborating with them to take that self-assessment to the next level. We also have guidance and best practices. This is for the projects themselves, but also for end users of cloud-native software. We just published at the KubeCon in London, the supply chain best practices V2. So the original version came out about a year after SolarWinds. So that was, I think, the end of 2021. And a few things have changed since 2021 to now, 2025. There was a huge shift in emphasis towards things like SBOMs. There wasn't a whole lot of tooling that existed for it back then. The other big area was attestations, having cryptographically verifiable evidence and metadata for the sorts of things that you're supposed to be doing, to be able to prove and then validate and ensure you have policies in place to know what you expect to have happened really did happen. And then there's another one around cloud-native controls. This is focused a little bit more on being able to map different things that you should do when deploying cloud-native software or using it to different regulatory frameworks. I think it's mostly NIST 853, but then that maps pretty well into things like SSDF and other sorts of frameworks that exist out there. The and compliance part was added to tag security as a part of this restructuring. So this is an area where we're still kind of building out new initiatives and new projects to have a little bit more focus on this going forward. So if any of you here are interested in that side of things and that angle, we're definitely looking for more contributors. The other part is just regularly meeting. We have demos and presentations from projects. We have kind of lightning community demos at the beginning of our weekly meeting. If you want to just show up and talk about something cool for 5 minutes, as long as it's open source and it's not a vendor pitch, it doesn't matter what sort of security product it is. If it's interesting, we'll ask you a ton of questions about it. And then we have longer presentations from projects that are undergoing a technical review within side of the CNCF. So there's a ton of things that we're doing here to help and support. The other part here is things technically a project can implement. I talked a little bit about SLSA, that's the supply chain levels for software artifacts. They have different tracks that really recommend and describe the best practices from a supply chain security perspective. And the really nice part about this is having that standard, being able to look and know that this is the way things should be done. This is how I can tell if I'm relatively immature and have a long way to go, or if I've kind of reached the end game, I know that I can have a higher degree of confidence in what I'm doing. And it started out with just the build track, how to securely build software. Now they've just finished up and they have the second release candidate for the source track, the different sorts of things that your source control system should have in place. And then there's another really cool one that's a little bit less mature around build environments. How do you ensure that even if the host of a build system is malicious, you can still have confidence in the software that's built by that environment? Really cool things with actually measuring up the boot of the build environment and things like that. Security insight specification is just a way to be able to have a machine-readable format to say, where are your SBOMs? Where are your attestations? Where is your license file? Things like this. It can mean if you have this and someone can read it, you don't have to respond to that 9-part questionnaire, because you can say, go read this security insights YAML file and it will tell you where everything is that you need to know. The other part on here is Scorecard. This is automated security checks, and it's really helpful for projects to be able to kind of go step by step. Maybe we start out failing every single check, but we can fix just one. We can do this one thing to make this one very concrete part of our security posture better. What you should not do with Security Scorecard, this is maybe the demon side, is to take the scorecard and run it against some other open source project that you've never contributed to, and then ask them, why can't you fix all of these things? Or file issues to say, go fix all of these things. The scorecard community has gotten some pushback and some negative responses from other open source projects because this has happened to them. And the other part is really all of these trends are towards transparency. And so this is the list of controls for the baseline for level 1. If you meet the requirements of all the level 1 for the security baseline, you should be able to meet most of the requirements for the EU CRA. And if you look on the right-hand side here, there is essentially the different things technically you would need to do and the tools that you could use. So if you use and have a security insights file and you're using Scorecard and you've done a SLSA build process, you probably are going to meet most of those requirements. And so really what we need to do, you can help projects complete all those requirements. If you want to invest a little bit in these open source projects, it's going to make their lives so much easier. It's also going to give you confidence in continuing to consume that over time. And in the end, it's all made out of people, right? This open source software, the maintainers, the users, most everybody who has an open source project they're contributing to it, not because they want to make a bunch of money, it's because they want to make the world a better place. They want to have secure software, they want to help people, and it can be a big burden to carry, and it can feel oftentimes like you're not doing enough. Like if you do just one more thing, you will have done enough to kind of prove your worth or your value. You can be tortured by the things you haven't done, the mistakes you've made. And being able to be honest and transparent about those things, being able to have help to fix those things and the support that you need, the acceptance goes a really long way. So with all of that said, it's been a long conference already. I hope you enjoyed most of this, and I'm happy to chat about any of these ideas, how we can kind of make the open source world a bit better. The best thing we can do to make open source more secure and safe is contribute to it. And there's a whole lot of ways to do that. And even using these tools yourself, you can help better understand the right questions to ask if you do have things you need from open source projects. So thank you all for coming. I think we've got 1 or 2 minutes if anybody has any questions. Yeah. There's a mic. I can repeat your question too, or you can go to the microphone.
I know this is rather specific, but the SLSA capability is something I wasn't familiar with till this week. So I'm taking that back and looking to implement it. I have to deal with air-gapped environments with SLSA, and so what should I be thinking about that? My initial thought is we really should just be building our own container images on my end and signing it internally, but using these tools on our internet-connected environments. But has this problem already been looked at already, or?
Yeah, so actually I can do a slightly shameless plug for one of my projects, Witness, that creates SLSA build attestations and does so particularly well in air-gapped environments. It supports a bunch of different mechanisms for signing the provenance. That's where a lot of people in the open source use internet-connected environments to connect with the public good instance of like the SigStore project for signing things. You can deploy all of that software in an air-gap as well if you want to sign that way, but also you could connect to a key management system or have static keys as secrets if that's what you have to do. And it just wraps around the build process that you have. And so you don't have to use GitHub Actions or a GitLab CI. That's probably the other biggest consideration, is how to do this specifically for the type of CI system that you have.